Welcome to video 2. In our first video, I showed you how to properly use a calculator. Now, sometimes we might think we're plugging it into the calculator correctly, and we still are getting the wrong answer. So it's kind of nice to think about and try to predict what kind of answer you should get before typing it into the calculator. That way, you won't be surprised by the answer. It'll be something that you're expecting, and you can feel a little bit more confident that you typed it in correctly. So that's what we're going to talk about in this video, how to predict what type of answer you should be getting. We're going to start by talking about the rules for adding together integers. Our first rule for adding together integers is if you have two numbers that have the same sign, they're either both positive or both negative, then in our head, we're going to pretend like they're both positive and we're going to add them together. So numbers with the same sign get added. When you write your answer should have the same sign as the original numbers. So when you're adding two negative numbers together, your answer should be negative. And when you're adding two positives together, your answer should be positive. The second rule for addition is if you're adding together two numbers that have different signs. So now we're adding together a positive with a negative. Then in your head, you're going to ignore the signs and you're going to do the bigger number minus the smaller number. Because in our head, it's always easier to do bigger minus smaller. When we write our final answer, we need to make sure that our answer has the same sign that the bigger number had in the original problem. If the bigger number was negative in the original problem, then we'll get a negative answer. And if the bigger number was positive, then we'll get a positive answer. These are the rules for adding. I'd like to show you a couple examples so you understand a little bit better what I'm talking about. We'll start with our first rule, which is two numbers with the same sign. If I see the problem 2 plus 3, I need to notice that both numbers are positive. Because both numbers are positive, in my head, I'm going to add them. 2 plus 3 is 5. Because both numbers were positive, I'm going to keep it a positive. 2 plus 3 should equal positive 5. Let me show you a visual on the number line about why we're adding and why it's positive. If you'd like to use the number line to add, you're always going to start at a 0. If you see a positive number, you'll go to the right, and if you see a negative number, you'll go to the left. So in this problem, positive 2 and positive 3 has me going to the right twice, which ends on a positive 5. And so this is how I can tell that the answer should be positive 5. All right, let's do another one. Negative 5 plus negative 1. So again, these numbers have the same sign. They're both negatives. So in my head, I'm going to say, what is 5 plus 1? And it's 6. But now, since they're both negative, I'm actually going to make my answer negative. And here's why. If we go back to the number line and we start at 0, if we go negative 5 spaces, so that's 5 spaces to the left, and from there we keep going one more negative space, one more space to the left, I'm still going to the left, and I'm living in the land of the negatives, which is why the answer to this problem is negative 6. So when you add two negative numbers together, you're going to go left on the number line, and you're going to go left twice. So you're still in those negative numbers, and your final answer needs to be negative. All right, let's take a look at some samples of the second rule. The second rule was when the numbers had different symbols. Here's my first example, 6 plus negative 10. In this problem, I have a positive and a negative, different signs. That means in my head, I need to think of a subtraction problem. When the signs are different, I have to subtract. Even though it says adding, you got to subtract. In my head, it's easier to do 10 minus 6. And 10 minus 6 is 4. Unfortunately, though, the final answer is not 4. The final answer is negative 4. And the reason why is that even though in my head I did 10 minus 6, it's not really what the question is saying. In the problem, the 10 was negative. And so I need to make that 4 a negative. -4. Let's take a look at what that looks like on a number line. So again, if I'm starting at 0, this problem says to go 6 to the right, which is all the way over here. But then from there, I'm going to go to the left 10. So I'm going to kind of backtrack. I'm going to go backwards over all of these positives. And since 10 is bigger than 6, I'm going to keep going into the land of the negatives. Since the bigger number was negative, I'm going to go further into the negatives, which is why my answer is negative. So the sign of the answer should be the same as the sign of the bigger number. And then we're subtracting. We're subtracting because we're going one way, but then we're backtracking and we're going the opposite direction. Let's do one more like this, and then we'll move on. In this scenario, again, I have different symbols for my numbers. I have a -3 and a +9. So in my head, I'm doing subtracting. In my head, it's easier for me to do 9 minus 3. My larger number was 9. 9 was positive, and so I should get a +6. Let's take a look at this on the number line. So I'm starting on 0, and the first number is -3, so I'm going to go to the left 3. Now the second number is +9, so I'm starting on this -3 because that's where I'm standing right now. I'm going to go to the right 9, and since 9 is bigger than 3, I'm going to bypass all the negative numbers, and I'm going to go into the positive numbers. So again, whatever sign the bigger number is, that's the side of the number line that you're going to land on. And so my final answer to this question is 6. These are the rules for adding. Now, we're not going to get rules for subtracting because we can actually change every subtraction problem into an addition problem. And here's how. You're going to change the subtraction sign to an adding sign. And you're going to change the sign of the second number. Essentially, what's going to happen is you're going to draw 2 lines in every problem. And that's how you change subtraction to addition. Once you have an addition problem, you can use the rules that we were just talking about. Here's an example. -3 minus -5. Oh my gosh, so many negative signs, so confusing. And so we're going to do this little trick. I'm going to draw 2 lines, always 2 lines. The first line changes the subtraction sign to an addition sign. The second line changes the sign of the second number. So since it was negative, I'm going to make it positive. If I wanted to, I could rewrite this problem, -3 plus 5. If I'm using my rules for addition, in my head, I'm going to subtract. 5 minus 3 is 2. 5 is bigger and 5 is positive, so the answer is +2. Let's try one more subtraction, and then we'll talk about multiplying and dividing. In this problem, and I have a subtraction problem, I'm going to change it to addition. I need to draw 2 lines. The first line changes it from a minus sign to a plus sign. The second line always has to go after the first line, so you're never going to change the sign of the first number. So the second line is going to change the 8. Since the 8 did not already have a symbol, I'm going to make it a -8 instead of a +8. And so now this problem is actually saying -3 plus -8. Since they're both negative in my head, since they have the same sign, I'm going to add together. In my head, I'm saying 3 plus 8 is 11. Since they were both negative, my answer will also be negative. So -11 is the correct answer. Okay. So this is how you can tell, first of all, if you should be adding or subtracting. And second of all, if your answer should be positive or negative. So you can kind of predict what the calculator should tell you. Now, these are the rules for adding and subtracting. We actually have different rules for multiplying and dividing, and those have to do with something called the magic triangle. Now, I'm hoping that we all know that on multiplying and dividing problems and on adding problems, anytime you have only positives, your answer will always be positive. The magic triangle is really going to start helping once we start to get negative signs into a problem. Here's the magic triangle. The magic triangle has a positive in the top corner and negatives in the bottom 2 corners. And again, the magic triangle can only be used for multiplying and dividing problems, not for adding or subtracting. To use the magic triangle, you can only be multiplying or dividing 2 numbers at a time, so you can't do it with 3 or 4. You're going to have to break it down to just 2 of them. And what you're going to do is you're going to cover up the 2 signs of the numbers that are there. And the third sign, the one that you did not cover up, that's what sign your answer should be. So again, this is a way to predict what sign our answer should be before using our calculator. Let's try some. This is 3 times negative 4. This is positive 3 times negative 4. And so if I'm using my magic triangle, I'm going to cover up the positive, and I'm going to cover up a negative. And the third symbol, the one that I did not cover up, that's what sign my answer should be. I would expect this to give me a negative answer. And the answer should be negative 12. Okay, so this is how you do the magic triangle. Let's try another one. Negative 5 times negative 6. This is multiplying, so we're allowed to use the magic triangle. Since they're both negative, I'm going to cover up both the negatives on the bottom, leaving me with the positive from the top. And so I would expect my answer to be a positive number, and it is positive 30. Now remember, this is very different than negative 5 plus negative 6. Negative 5 plus negative 6 makes negative 11. So when you're adding two negatives, the answer will still be negative. But when you're multiplying two negatives, the answer turns to a positive. So just really make sure that you separate out those rules. Okay? This also works for division, so you could do the same thing if you had two numbers being divided. Cover up the signs of each number, and that will tell you the sign of your final answer. All right, that's the end of our second video.